is it fair to say that Lovie came across as a pro and kind of enamored people, at a very least? It feels like small steps, but I think it felt like they'd actually hired a bona fide head coach and he was talking to a media in a way which how to do it, and almost came across as reasonably impressive, despite his really calm demeanor.
Yeah, I couldn't put it any better than you just did, quite honestly. I think that's exactly the way that I looked at it, and that was what I was expecting. Once we found out, and it was Sunday night, obviously, when we started hearing about Lovie, all of a sudden, this sudden shift to Lovie Smith as the favorite. One of my immediate thoughts was, hey, that's not a sexy hire, but that's pretty doggone reliable. Like, I don't know how much he's going to help or hurt you. I think that's just, he's kind of a standard bearer, like, hey, you need a head coach. You happen to got one in the building. You got Lovie Smith. Just put him in there, and then everything else is going to work around it. Like, the next big thing is going to be obviously focusing back on Nick Caserio and the job that he does, both as a talent evaluator, someone who brings in talent, who's able not to just evaluate it but bring it in, and also his role in coaching. Like, I don't think that can be understated that he plays a role with the coaching staff as well. And so whoever your coach was going to be was going to have to, in some ways, fall in line with sort of Nick Caserio's overall vision. But yes, no, I thought, to the point of Lovie Smith, that's what you're getting, is a reliable voice, a reliable face, somebody that everyone knows. Like, I think back to last year when we would interview the defensive players going into OTAs and going into, the offseason training programs, and the defensive players, just to a man. I mean, you can talk about Lovie Smith's defense being outdated, and, obviously Lovie's in his 60s and all of this other stuff, and his heyday is long gone. But the players who are young, by the way, these are mostly Gen Z players that we're talking about, millennial and Gen Z players that we're talking about, were just effusive in their praise for Lovie Smith and have just a lot of admiration for the guy as a defensive mind, as an established coach in the league. I think that helps. I think that helps with their credibility as an organization. I was saying this too. I was saying this too before the press conference was, hey, if there's anybody in that building or anybody that's in Texans brass at this point, if we go down from Cal McNair, Jack Easterby, to Nick Caserio, to now the head coach, which is Lovie Smith now, there's only one person in that group that doesn't have to prove themselves. That's like, not, I mean, he has to prove himself obviously in this new job, but I mean overall reputation wise, there's only one person in that group that's got any kind of built-in equity and an established reputation and is not still having to prove themselves in their current role. He's been a successful head coach. He's been an unsuccessful head coach, but he's been a head coach. He has a reputation that I don't think needs massaging. Everybody else that's above him, Cal McNair, Nick Caserio, Jack Easterby, those were the ones that I needed to be sold on and probably still need to be sold on throughout this process. So I think they did themselves a favor in bringing in a coach that at least somebody around here has got some built-in equity.
Yeah, well, that's the equity. And I think that's one thing. It's such a contrast from a year ago when you could tell, with all the best intentions, the most grandest optimist, you could put down a nerve, you could put down whatever. That guy you wheeled out there a year ago was not up for the task. And there'd been a reason why, and we'll come on to some of the issues, perhaps why he hadn't been, but certainly he had, in terms of his own self-preparation, David Culley was not fit to be a head coach, and we saw that very quickly. And you saw that in the first press conference. It was awkward. It was staged with, the implanted question with Melissa or Miranda or whatever, Melinda or whatever her name was. And, and the whole thing.
Hold on. It was Melissa. Her name was Melissa, and then he called her Lisa at
Lisa,
the end.
that's the one, yeah.
We're not sure.
Yeah.
He goes by Lisa for short. So that was interesting, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, despite the fire alarm, which was, they actually did quite well to get around it. And I thought when you saw Drew Doherty and DP were with him talking to him after the press conference, and he said, I've actually pointed out the empty seats to the players, and I've actually said, and we'll.
The guys, look at the stadium right now. I was telling some of the defense guys, look at the stadium right now. A lot of empty seats. There's going to be a time where you're not going to see these empty seats. The fans are going to come back. Right now, we can't expect them to like a lot of things that we're doing, but that day is coming.
That sense of realism is just something that's just so refreshing. If you read every comment and every kind of, retweet of it, it was just been missing for a long time. And that was the note I put on it was, that should, if that continues, that should, remove some of these divisions in the fan base, because I think what you've had for a long time now is basically nothing concrete to hold on to. And basically it's a question of, do you want to go along or not go along with their delusions? And actually, it really felt like for the first time there was somebody there, professional, who could inspire confidence, who could inspire a bit of unity. And I think that was a real positive. Now, how we got there is very, very different.
And speaking to that, speaking to both of those points, though, I mean, how would they have been able to sell that or produce that had they done the thing that they were looking to do before we got here, right? I mean, that's the next logical question. It's like everything, for as little, whatever goodwill you accomplish with this press conference and with this hire in the immediacy, how much of that could you account for? How much of that would you have gotten or lost had you done the other thing? How much did you really kind of save yourself? Certainly from a PR standpoint, but just tactically on top of that, how much did you save yourself by making this move instead of the one that you wanted to make, right? You know what we're talking about, the Josh McCown thing, there's a variance there.
It was a turning point, and it's one of those ones that is a turning point that by no luck of, or by some divine intervention, one for a better phrase, changed the direction, certainly for the short term of the franchise. But, providing the fact that we're buying into the fact that McCowan was very much the intention or a possible intention, what do you think the catalyst was for that change, and why did they end up with Lovie?
Yeah, so I'm just going to say here and be very clear about it. I know that they did their best to deny and talk around how much the Brian Flores, if at all, the Brian Flores lawsuit that was filed last week, how much that factored into them changing courses. Excuse me again. How much that factored into them changing courses. I know that they did not want to lend any credence to that idea. But we all know better than that. Like everyone who's around, we have been expecting, or had been, I'll say, had been expecting Josh McCown to be named the head coach for at least a week. And that's not because we were guessing or because we were projecting. That is solid intel. That is real information. I got to say this, actually, since we're on the subject, because this is very much an internet topic. I don't know how much you saw it or how much in your spaces this is a thing, but I see a lot of criticism of the media getting it wrong and not knowing what they were talking about. Yeah. And they pulled a fast one on the media. The media he's got it tight. He's got it locked down. No, I'm sick of reading that stuff. Yeah, 100%. Oh my God, and it's it's an insult to their own, to those people's own intelligence. By the way, that's an insult to their very own intelligence because they're suggesting that they are stupid. Like you are, whoever you are, and I do not want to scare away any listeners or whatever. But if you think that, you need to really seriously reevaluate your own critical thinking skills. All right. Because here's the one thing, everyone who reported to you that there had been a shift and that they were going to hire Lovie Smith, those were all the same people who were suggesting that Josh McCown was a real candidate and a leader in the clubhouse. And other than saying that the Brian Flores lawsuit didn't really factor into them changing gears there, they didn't do anything to refute that. They didn't say anything to shut that down, their fascination with Josh McCown, who may possibly, at least as of Tuesday, seem like could have still been someone who would be added to this staff in some form of capacity. And we've heard different things about that, whether he would be a part of the staff or not. But this was a clear pivot. Did nobody get nothing wrong? Nothing was incorrectly reported about the Josh McCown / eventual Lovie Smith hire, like the Josh McCown courtship. They 100% were considering. Now, there's some ambiguity here on, was it a done deal? Had they absolutely decided it, or were they leaning towards doing it? there's some room for discussion there. But this was 100% something that they wanted to do. They wanted to hire Josh McCown. That information, and look, you don't have to trust us, but we're connected to those folks up there. We have conversations with the people in that building that you hear in public. We have conversations with the people in that building that you don't hear in public. And everything that you don't hear in public is not necessarily stuff that we can therefore turn around and say in public. But the gist of it is, this is what they were going to do. This is what they wanted to do. Sometimes they'll put those things out there just to get a feeler to see what is the public response and reaction to it. And then they'll recalculate what it is that they're doing. That happens as well. But they were absolutely going to hire Josh McCown, absolutely wanted to hire Josh McCown. And then the Brian Flores lawsuit came down. And here's what I want to say about that real quick. The Brian Flores lawsuit had several details in it that were funny, anecdotes in it that were funny and headline worthy. You know, talk about Bill Belichick sending the wrong text message to the wrong Brian, the wrong raced Brian at that. Like, not just the wrong guy, but like, hey, I was trying to send it to the white guy and I sent it to the black guy, not knowing that part of it would even matter, right? Like, if you send the wrong text to the wrong person, you don't necessarily think, oh, I meant to send that to the white one or the black one. Like, that probably didn't even factor into it. And then lo and behold, fast forward a couple of days, and that very much mattered. That not only was it the wrong Brian, it was the wrong color Brian. That happened. Okay. The John Elway detail of him showing up to the interview drunk, which surprised literally no one who's ever followed John Elway, right? Especially his post-playing career. Like, that was the least surprising thing to be revealed in the lawsuit. Funny nonetheless, if true. Yeah. And then, of course, Stephen Ross, a headline in and of itself, aside from the racial component that was brought up in the lawsuit, was the whole, hey, this guy might be paying to tank games. Like, he might be not just wink, wink, nod, nod, but like actively trying to tank, which is a big deal aside from the race thing. Those were the main takeaways from the lawsuit, right? Well, once you get further down in there are substantive points about the hiring practices of the NFL and how they don't measure up to some of the things that they've committed themselves to, and how the numbers flat out are offensive when you consider the racial makeup of the NFL, the racial makeup of people who go into coaching, and then the ones that get into the pipeline, the ones that get the jobs, the ones that get second chances, the ones that get third chances. Lovie Smith, according to that lawsuit, is only the second minority coach to get a third job, and I'm not even sure who that first one would have been. He might be the first black one. Like, this does not happen, okay? And they were very much aware, because this wasn't an isolated, hey, this is just about the Texans. This was a league-wide issue that was brought up by Brian Flores in this lawsuit about how the NFL has flat out failed in its supposed commitment to diversity in hiring, and specifically for coaches. And here they are about to hire not only a white coach, because that they could have gotten away with. It's not that you can't hire a white coach. They were going to hire a white coach who ain't never coached before over a black coach who might have been the best on the market in Brian Flores, or Lovie Smith, who's already in your building, who's got pretty much everything you could ask for in a coaching resume other than an actual Super Bowl victory. So, like, how was that going to look publicly? And not just publicly, how were you yourself? Nick Caserio, Cal McNair, Jack Easterby, who I know, look, I know Jack Easterby is a punchline, but I do think if there's anything that he's sincere about, I think he does care about diversity. I think that's something that is actually an important thing to him, even whether he's competent and actually executing anything that he wants to do is a whole nother matter and up for debate. But I do think he's well intended in that way. How were they going to reckon with hiring a white candidate who by credential and qualification is at least, if not unqualified, underqualified over all of those others? It would have been a very, very hard thing to reckon with themselves or with the league and with the public. And so they had to obviously look in another direction and think about, hey, we either need to hire an experienced white coach or we need to right this wrong with the whole diversity thing. And I think they were able to check off a lot of boxes that were important, not just lip service and cliches and you know, lipstick on a pig sort of thing. Check in a lot of boxes with a competent, qualified, deserving, and yes, black head coach in Lovie Smith. So I think all of those things had to factor into it. And I'm not really buying what the public answer was there, because we kind of already knew what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There is so much of that now, and I don't know where that derived from, where that comes from, a source of frustration or a source of, because I think like when the team's this shit for this long, people start to get a bit kind of, they start to try and find small positives that aren't really there. And then, people that, aren't willing to sort of, as you said, lipstick on a pig sort of stuff, kind of then becomes, oh, it's negative or it's not true and all this kind of stuff. But, and going back to that media narrative, just finally, just the way you could describe it is that people say often that Jack Easterby is a media creation. Well, you almost fucking hired Josh McKinnon. So let's leave it at that. That's all you need to say on that one, because I'm not saying he's making the final call, but what he is, and I wrote an article about this 3 weeks ago on the website, he is great at influencing people, and he continues to do that. So whether you think he's making the final call or not, the person making the final call might not even think he's making it, but he's certainly having a hand in it. And as long as he's here, well, the dysfunction, the disjointed processes will just continue. So, we're used to it now. It almost washes because you're kind of used to it. It's that abusive behavior. People just then their tolerance to it reduces over time, like any form of abuse. But yeah, here we are talking about almost hiring a candidate who should never have been in the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that there are ways for all of them to atone for their mistakes. Like, I understand that there are legitimate reasons, and there's a legitimate segment of the fan base that will never be able to get on board with the Jack Easterby thing. And look, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. You don't have to convince me, and I'm not going to try to convince you or none of that. Like, I totally get it. But I will say there's a way to sort of right your wrongs, or at the very least, not to use a Jack Easterbyism, but he talks about doing the next right thing. Once they actually start doing that, maybe we can move forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think the hiring of Lovie Smith is somewhat of a compromise, but could be viewed as that, right? They got to keep doing the next right thing, so to speak, right? So, like, practice what you preach here. Like they talk about being servant leaders and doing the next right thing. All right, well, I don't know what the leadership was that brought you to, we're going to hire David Culley and trot that out to our fan base for a year. I don't know how that was the next right thing or how that was servant leadership. I don't know how the next right thing was. We're going to give off the impression that we might hire Josh McFreaking-Cowan as our head coach, who's never coached beyond volunteer high school work. I don't know how that was the next right thing or how that signified any kind of leadership. It would have been ballsy. I'll give him that. It would have been ballsy, but not in a way that I would have preferred or would have given him credit for. So, like, the Jack Easterby thing, I think Cal more than anything, right? Like, we talk so much about Jack. I'll say this: we don't talk enough about Cal, because Jack has become his kind of the conduit. He's kind of become he's been the sort of the bulletproof vest, so to speak, for at times for Bill O'Brien. I think at times for Nick Caserio, but mostly for Cal McNair. And that's really who we need to be talking about. And to be fair to them, I think this was a good step. Now it's really upon Nick to go get actual good players, and like whatever the actual coaching is. Like, now it's time to evaluate that. It's not just a press conference. It's not just public statements. It's not just how do you respond to a lawsuit that alleges racist hiring practices on the league and uses your own most recent hire, okay, as an example, because that is in the lawsuit. The David Culley thing, for better or worse, is in the lawsuit. So, like, now is really the time to prove yourself. I said this earlier in the show. Like, it wasn't Lovie Smith that I needed to be sold on. It wasn't Lovie Smith that needed to prove anything to me. I know what Lovie Smith's about. I know what his track record is, good and bad. It's Cal. It's Jack. It's Nick. So let's go. Come on with it. Let's see what you do with the players that you draft and that you acquire in free agency, right? Let's see how much you allow, how much autonomy you give your coaching staff. And if not, how much of an asset are you to the coaching staff if you're going to be heavy-handed in it? Like, it's got to be one or the other. Either you need to let them do their thing, or if you're going to be one that's so hands-on, it needs to be good. Like, right? Like, or when it's not just David Culley, Lovie Smith, whoever the coach is, Tim Kelly, whoever the coach is. It's, man, this coaching staff, Pep Hamilton, Tim Kelly, like just whoever the guy was, right? The play caller, Nick Caserio, who's on the head. Nick Caserio sat right next to Pep Hamilton in the press box throughout the entire year while when they called plays, right? So like all of this matters now, okay? And so I think they have an opportunity here to kind of right some wrongs, or at the very least, if they can't right the wrongs per se, because you can't undo the past, to like just move forward in a positive way. I thought that I was going to say Monday. I thought Tuesday was it was a good step, a nice step in that direction.